Welcome to the newest episode of Beyond the Fame with Jason Fraley. I'm your host, Jason Fraley, picking the brains of the top filmmakers, musicians, and artists of our time. Banjo extraordinaire Béla Fleck headlines Wolf Trap in Virginia on Saturday, sharing a bill with Sam Bush and the Jerry Douglas Band. I spoke to Fleck about his illustrious career from Newgrass Revival to the Flecktones, racking up over a dozen Grammys along the way. Hey, Béla Fleck. Hey, thanks so much for joining us on WTOP.
My pleasure. Good to see you, Jason.
We're talking because you're coming to Wolf Trap on July 2nd, this Saturday. So not only a few days left, get your tickets now. What can we expect from the show? I know you'll be with mandolin master Sam Bush and then also Jerry of the Jerry Douglas Band. You guys did Strength in Numbers a few years back, but what can we expect from the show?
Oh, it's just a pure joy from start to finish. Now, I know we're trying to sell tickets and everything, but I'm an honest sort of fella. And everybody's just so happy. People are playing their butts off. There's no butts left anywhere on the tour. We've got 3 bands. They're all kind of ridiculously talented bands, and led by one by me, and one by Sam Bush, one by Jerry Douglas. These are my pals from the 80s. We've been playing bluegrass all this time and sort of progressing on our separate careers. And I haven't been playing bluegrass for a long, long time, though. So this is a return for me. I put out an album called My Bluegrass Heart. And actually won the Grammy this year for Best Bluegrass Album, which is amazing, and put together an incredible band of younger players, younger than me. Brian Sutton, like the top guitarist of his generation. Sierra Hull, unbelievable mandolin player. Michael Cleveland is one of the greatest bluegrass fiddle players who ever lived. Mark Schatz playing the bass. He's just been part of so much great music for decade after decade. And Justin Moses, who plays every instrument better than any of the rest of us and sings. So it's a killer band. But what's really fun about this tour, is everybody plays their music, but then we all get together. And the jams at the end, they're not really jams because we're playing these quite involved, complex tunes. It's high energy, but it's pretty impressive. When Sam and Jerry are out there with the Bluegrass Hard Band, it gets cranking.
Yeah, those encore jams are going to be exciting. As far as your actual set, your portion of it,
yeah,
is it going to be My Bluegrass Heart, the Grammy-winning album you just mentioned? Is it going to be that start to finish, or is it going to be some songs from that and then some of your past stuff too?
There's a couple of pastures. There's a couple of pastures.
Pastures.
I like that. I don't know. I said it again. Yeah, I'm like for instance, we do Big Country, which the Flecktones did, and we also we have a couple of vocals in there. Sam sings, so his set comes in the middle. It starts with Jerry Douglas playing his music, which is beautiful, with a great band, very unusual and very. He's just one of the great melody players and improvisers of any instrument. Great American musician. But it's instrumental mostly. He may sing one song, and then Sam Bush's music is a little more vocal. This stuff is pretty instrumental because I don't sing. At least I don't want anyone to know that I sing. But so it's very much built around this pretty complex music that I've created that is hopefully, while being a little bit heady, also keeps the heart and the soul of bluegrass music. The rhythm and the groove and the virtuosic playing. It's just a trip. We're just having such a good time. This will be the last show of this tour. And we've never put these 3 bands together before. So it's kind of like a miniature bluegrass festival, honestly,
right.
Or miniature Telluride bluegrass, someplace, an open-minded bluegrass festival, but with bluegrass at the heart of who everyone is.
I love it. You just mentioned the concept of a bluegrass fest. Did you just recently play Delfest up in Cumberland?
I did. I played at Delfest, and we were at Telluride. We're making all the stops this year. All the major bluegrass festivals have been having us, which is nice. Which is kind of why I wanted to do it. I wanted to reconnect with that world, and I've been having a great experience playing, like with Chick Corea, my hero, the jazz pianist who passed this last couple of years ago, and with the Zakir Hussain, and with orchestras, and doing things where you take, and the Flecktones, of course, and doing things where I take the banjo out of the bluegrass band and try to, treat it as if it were a real instrument. But every once in a while, if I don't play bluegrass, I get a little sad, and then when I play bluegrass, the joy comes back, because that's where I started. That's what made me want to play banjo in the first place, was hearing Earl Scruggs and listening to that kind of music. So it's something banjo players need to do if you're a 3-finger player. Every once in a while, touch base with the firmament.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about that, when you first heard Earl Scruggs and got into banjo and that's also why I mentioned Delfest from a couple weeks ago, because we talked to Del McCurry. He said he was inspired by, hearing Scruggs as well. And it sounds like
Yeah.
you were too. I know you were born in New York in the late 50s, but was it for you, was it Scruggs? Was it on the Beverly Hillbillies theme?
It sure was, and people laugh about it, but I gotta say, listen to that banjo. It's no laughing matter. It's such great playing. It's just so grounded and earthy, and yet so fast and crisp. And I don't know. I still stop in my tracks whenever I hear Earl Scruggs play.
Also a great show. Hills, that is. I mean, that's a good one.
I mean, the thing is, I'm like really serious about music, so it's funny that the thing that would turn me on to the banjo,
Right.
that I'm so serious, like I'm cold, serious as a heart attack about
Sure.
working on music and making it being as good as I can be, but the fact that it was a comedy, a very silly, in fact, you could say insulting comedy, except the fact that the hillbillies always were actually smarter than the city slickers, so that
Right.
maybe not. But yeah, it was a cool show in its way. But it's like I don't stand by the show the way I stand by Earl Scruggs' banjo playing. That's the thing for me. And,
That's
and
what changed.
Earl,
Yeah.
it does. It changed me, and almost everybody who has fallen in love with the banjo, like in that sort of type A way where they have to go learn to play it, they all heard Earl Scruggs. He has some kind of a power to transform an unactivated banjo player into a zombie, looking for an instrument, like I must find the banjo and learn how to play it, must not do anything else, out of my way, mortals, that sort of thing. But I don't know why. There's certain musicians who have that power on their instrument to transform other people, and Earl had that. Um, Still love it. Still
So
love it.
hearing him is, that sparked your zombie obsession with wanting to play, as you said. But how
Yeah.
did you actually get your hands on one? Wasn't it a gift from grandpa or something?
It was, yes. You've done well. You've done well. Yeah. So the thing about the banjo, when you listen to it, is you go, "Wow, that's cool," but I could never do that. That's the general response when you hear the banjo. The first is like, "Oh my God, that is so special," but I no, nah, impossible. It sounds like a machine. I mean, it sounds like no human being could possibly do it. So although I had fallen in love with the sound of the banjo when I was, I guess, 4 or 5, something like that, um, I never presumed that I could play it, so I never got one. But anytime I heard it, I was banjo aware from then on. Anytime it was like, oh, there's that sound. I love that. That is so cool. And then the movie Deliverance came out when I was about 14. And so when I was 15, I went to see my grandfather up in Peekskill, New York, and he had bought a banjo, and I think he wanted to give it to my brother. I can't remember exactly because I was starting to monkey around with the guitar a little bit. I was one of those kids that was like interested in the guitar. You say, oh, he's interested in music. Interested isn't enough. You got to be, really fairly psycho to get anywhere on an instrument. So for me, when I got the banjo, I transformed from someone who was interested in music to being obsessed with the banjo.
Yeah.
And very quickly I got pretty good. Like by the time I was out of high school, it's only 3 years later, I was at a level that I was joining professional bands and touring bands and traveling around playing banjo and bluegrass bands. But remember, I'm from New York City. I'm from Upper West Side, so it's pretty bizarre. This is the life that I've ended up with, but it's been amazing.
That might be why you connected with Deliverance. The City Slickers going on a journey into nature and
Pretty
learning.
scary stuff.
It's a
I have
master,
to
John
share.
Borman masterpiece. That's such a great movie.
It's an incredible movie, yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
I like the canoeing part and I like the banjo part. There's some parts in it that I would rather avoid, but
But that's all symbolism for mankind's rape of nature and et cetera, et cetera.
that's
But
true.
I'm a movie critic. We're here to talk music. What are we doing?
Yeah, it's an
uh,
incredible movie actually, but yeah,
really,
it's not for the meek or the young.
faint of heart. Yes.
Yes.
Definitely. Well, you mentioned so you're talking about the early formative days in New York, but then you moved to Boston and joined the Tasty Licks, do a couple albums with them, and you do your solo album, Crossing the Tracks. How do you meet Sam Bush and join Newgrass Revival? How does that? Because Sam's
Right.
playing with you this weekend at Wolf Trap. So how
Right.
did the Newgrass Revival formation happen?
Okay, so there was like an elite crew of people that were the top cats in bluegrass when I came up, and it was Sam Bush, it was Tony Rice, and Jerry Douglas. Those were the cats, and so I wished I could play with those guys, but I was a bit younger, a few years younger than those guys, so they seemed like impossible superstars that I would never know even. But at any rate, I also had this going against me, that I was a Yankee banjo player.
Yankee banjo player.
banjo player from New York City. So, at any rate, I moved to Kentucky after the Boston Tasty Licks band broke up. Also with Mark Schatz, who, by the way, I'm still, is playing bass on this tour. We've been best pals since the Boston days in the '70s. We used to play on the street when Tasty Licks broke up. We played in Harvard Square all summer just to make a living and had a great time out on the streets. But at any rate, we moved together to Kentucky, where I got to live in the town. The J.D. Crowe, he's the guy that Tony Rice and Ricky Skaggs is another guy who I wanted to play with. They all played with him in a band called the New South. Jerry Douglas joined. Tony Rice, Ricky, and J.D. Crowe was like the holy grail. If you couldn't get Earl, J.D. was like right up there in terms of this powerful sound that made you stop in your tracks if you were a banjo type person. And I wanted to get that influence because I didn't want to be a Yankee banjo player. And so during those 2 years that I was in Kentucky, I kind of transformed. I've been using that word a lot in this interview, but I did. I transformed my right hand and my way of playing, and I really studied the old Earl Scruggs live shows and the J.D. Crowe stuff, and really got my sense of time and tone better together. And then I also got a real banjo, because my banjo teacher had said years ago, he said, if you want to be a real banjo player, you gotta have a real banjo, which means a pre-war Gibson Mastertone from the '30s. And I got that around that time, which I'm still playing, and I still love that instrument. So yeah, by the time I had done that, I was ready for Sam Bush to call me up when his banjo player left. He also played. He played on a lot of people's records in those days. Still does. He had played on a couple of tracks of my first banjo record, which I couldn't believe he would do, but he did. And so we had knew each other, and I was just this kid banjo player who'd made a banjo record that he'd played on to make money, play on a session.
Yeah.
But he remembered me, and he liked that I would dive off the deep end. Like if I didn't know what I was doing, that wouldn't stop me from continuing to fight Scrabble to try and finish the solo some way or other. And Jimmy Goodrow, who I played with in Spectrum, the band in Kentucky, he would always say, it's like you climb out on the end of the tree limb and then you turn around and saw the limb off. When I would play bluegrass or whatever, I
like that.
Off the end. So anyway, at any rate, some combination of this Yankee style of banjo playing and this J.D. Crowe, Earl Scruggs thing is what I ended up being. And all of those rules that I learned about taste and time and tone and a good instrument stood me in good stead when I joined Newgrass Revival, and also when I started the Flecktones, because then I had these musical concepts really firmly, these bluegrass musical concepts were firmly embedded in me, and I played everything that I played. I tried to play with that kind of a feel and that kind of a perspective. So, which is, I think, why people in the jazz world or other worlds were willing to play with me, because my basics were pretty solid. And I was supposed to be good, but it was, at bluegrass or whatever. But I was also, we could play in time. We could get something going. So that's helped a lot. All those bluegrass rules apply to every music.
Right, exactly. And just so, and in case there's maybe some, maybe younger listeners that don't know, I just wanted to sort of help draw the distinction with them between, Newgrass Revival is this, I guess, bluegrass, progressive bluegrass.
Right.
And once you form Béla Fleck and the Flecktones in the late 80s, that's like infused with these jazz elements.
Much more, just sort of a hybrid musical form that blended a lot of different things, but that had the banjo at the center of it. But trying desperately not to be bluegrass. Right. Honestly, trying to live in a jazz world.
Banjo jazz.
Not easy to pull off, because there's a lot of people against the idea. And a lot of people, for instance, in the jazz world, didn't quite remember that the banjo was an African instrument.
Right.
That's where it came from. But Newgrass Revival was the progressive force on the bluegrass scene. The bluegrass, started out with the kind of songs you think about, "Rollin' My Sweet Baby's Arms" or "Salty Dog" or "Cabin Home on the Hill," which told the story of, the southern, rural southerner, lamenting about the past and the old way they grew up and that sort of thing, or telling the story of their life in the country. Newgrass Revival was very influenced by the Allman Brothers and maybe even the Grateful Dead and Led Zeppelin and the blues singers and all kinds of music, gospel music, and so their music, they would do, like, for instance, a 20-minute jam based on a Japanese scale, or play a Leon Russell song or cover different things. And so they were the hippie jazz weirdos. They weren't really jazzy. They were more like they were extremely virtuosic. I wouldn't say they were so much jazzy, very blues oriented, but jammy. They were the first real jam. I think they were. So when I joined the band in '81, they had already been around for quite a while, at least 7 years, maybe even 10 years. And this was like a new version of the band. It was actually a little bit less crazy, but did very well. But I learned so much from playing with Sam and John and Pat about music, things I didn't understand about team sport music, where everyone's equal and you're all supporting each other 100% all the time. And then I got to start playing with people like Tony Rice, and Jerry was around. Jerry Douglas was the guy who said, you need to call Sam. He needs a banjo player. This is your chance, So these are guys I've known since,
Oh yeah.
the 70s. And everyone's very vital. Jerry Douglas is, and Sam are still the greatest players of their instruments, that have been ambassadors for their instruments and collaborated with all kinds of wonderful musicians, brought their, and in doing it, elevated bluegrass, I think.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, but we've been circling, over the years. We're always best friends. We play once a year at the Telluride Bluegrass Festival, and we do a bluegrass set, and that's the only thing we've been doing. But every once in a while, we find a way to get together and do something, more so. And this is one of those times. Around the Bluegrass Heart record, they all played, and we did a month tour in December with those guys, and it was fantastic. And now we've got our bands together. So it's we're dearest friends, and I guess we're born to play together.
Yeah.
But it's pretty wonderful to find these new musicians that I'm playing with now. People like Chris Thiele and Billy Strings, who won't be here, but that level of the next generation, the Brian Suttons and the Michael Clevelands and the Sierra Halls, are every bit as fun to play with, but different. So you get to have both on this tour. You get to see it all.
Oh, I love Chris Thiele. He came on with us. If our listeners want to check out our archives, he came on a couple months ago, and what a great guy! Fascinating conversation. But there's one more before you run. You've been generous with your time. There was something you just mentioned that I wanted to unpack really quick. You were saying about the African origins of the banjo. I know you did a documentary in like 2008, Throw Down Your Heart, about you traveling to Africa to find the actual roots of this instrument that you came to love so much. So yes, tell that a little bit. I know Ken Burns actually even went into it a little bit in the Big Country Music Magnum Opus documentary he did. But remind people of that it has some origins across the seas over there.
Absolutely. Rhiannon Giddens is another person who's very good at talking about this stuff, and she knows more than I do about some of the details. But the basic story is very simple, which is that the slaves that came from West Africa, that's where the banjo-like instruments were. They brought the knowledge of how to make them with them. Now, some people say that they actually brought the instruments and that more slaves survived when they were allowed to have some culture on the ships. But for me, that's hearsay. I don't know the truth about that. But it is very clear that those instruments originated in West Africa and came over with the slaves. And it was one of the things. I know that drumming was frightening for the slave keepers because they felt like the slaves could communicate with each other and maybe put together an uprising, but the banjos weren't.
They banned, even some southern states banned drums on plantations. Yeah.
Right. Exactly. That's what I'm getting at. So, yeah. So anyway, eventually, what's interesting is that, there's a lot of, irritating things about America, but there are some great things about America, mostly, I hope. And one of the great things, I think, is this is a place where certain things can happen, where things can mix, cultures can mix and find a way to coexist. And bluegrass is kind of the story of that, because you think of it, this is this very white Southern instrument, but and Southern cultural music. But Bill Monroe was very influenced by black musicians around his area. There's famous stories about a guy named Arnold Schultz, a black fiddle player who he played with a lot. And there's a lot of stories about on the plantations where the Africans that were there playing their banjo-like instruments were told to get together with these Scottish fiddle players and play for a dance. Mm-hmm. Abby has heard stories about that. My wife, Abby, who's a banjo player, and she tells me. So at any rate, it mixes, it turns into this old-time music and then this bluegrass music, which is very much multicultural.
Yeah. Well, that's why I wanted to point it out, because this, I mean, as revolutionary as what you're doing with going from banjo and then into jazz, etc., pop, etc., it's it's been mixing, influences and sources all the way centuries ago. So
Exactly. Right.
keep going on, Yankee bluegrass player. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? It's
It kind of helped me to understand myself because I felt like, why am I this, New York City person with no connection to the South? Why am I drawn to
right,
this instrument? And it almost didn't make any sense for me to be playing the Cabin Home on the Hill, although I love to play like try to play like Earl Scruggs or J.D. Crowe. I'm not them. But it made more sense when I could put it into context that this is just a piece of what banjo playing is, bluegrass. And
right.
bluegrass is a phenomenal thing, just like the way we think about like flamenco in
Oh yeah,
Spain or Indian music. Bluegrass is a great American music. It's something we have to be very proud of, and I wish we revered it the way, for
love it.
instance, people in Ireland or Scotland make their music part of school curriculums and so
Sure,
forth.
yeah,
Yeah. I wish we were as proud of it as we ought to be, because
yeah.
not because it's a Southern white music, but because it's actually a very, very multiracial music that we has become typecast, sadly, by the very things that made me want to play the banjo in the first place: the Deliverance movie and the Beverly Hillbillies TV show. So it's very ironic,
What an
actually.
ironic, complex history. I like the way you put that. It is a multicultural instrument that has been typecast by the very things that very pop culture things that inspired you to want to do it to begin with. Fascinating,
Yeah.
complex roots
But
there.
then I also went to Africa to. I knew it came from Africa. I knew where it came from. I knew that, but I wanted to go experience it in person. And I also had a little bit of notoriety at that point with the Flecktones. We were doing a lot of shows with Dave Matthews. A lot of people were paying attention at that moment,
Mhm.
and I thought I should go just get the word out. If
Yeah.
while I have people's ears, because I know that that's a celebrity or attention is a fleeting thing in the music industry, and I really wanted to do it. It seemed like a good thing to do for everybody, and so I went to Africa, and also selfishly because I was really fascinated by the music itself. I wanted to go play with these people, and I did, and I brought them here, and we did great tours around, and had the film, which actually did pretty well, and the album too, which won a couple of Grammys. So I got away with it, but the truth is, the music is always the thing that drives me the most.
Yeah.
If I wasn't just so excited about playing with those guys in person, I wouldn't have probably gone. But
Right.
all the other stuff I can, act all proud of. But the truth is, I'm very musically motivated and artistically motivated, and not always thinking of, my first motivation isn't always the pure, honest, sweet what's good for the community. That
Right.
my first motivation is, what can I learn? What do
That
they
drive,
do? I don't know what
inner
they're
drive.
doing.
Yeah. Yeah.
What
Exactly.
is that? What time signature are they in? How could I learn that on my banjo? So I'm just being honest. That's who I am. But usually at some point I do the right thing.
Well, if you stay true to that inner drive, that's when all the accolades and everything follows. But it comes from that place first. Awesome. Well, we appreciate you joining us. I guess final seconds. I got to tell our listeners, what are you up to now? 15 Grammys? Is that right?
Well, it's a little confusing because there was this Grammy that Chick Corea and I won. It was called the Latin Grammy.
Okay.
And
Oh,
so
okay.
when Chick was and I were playing quite a bit together, and I asked him, "Well, do you count that as a Grammy?" Because he had a lot of Grammys, a lot more than me. And he said, "Yeah, I count it as a Grammy." So whenever anyone asks me, I include the Latin Grammy. But then all of a sudden, people say, "Well, I'm looking on Wikipedia. It says you only have 15, not 16. So why
So
are you
it's
saying you have 16?"
16 with the Latin Grammy. Is that
I
right?
think so. I think
Okay.
so.
We'll
So
go. We'll go with 16. But where do you keep them all? I mean, do they just around the house or
I try to spread them around so they don't intimidate
the guests?
the guests.
Awesome.
They're around. Yeah, they're around. I used to hide them all because I was awkward. It's like, well, if I have a friend that comes over who doesn't have a Grammy, which happens quite often,
Yeah.
maybe it would be, at first you want to show these things off, but then as time goes by, you kind of want it. It's more, you're
Yeah.
glad,
Yeah.
really glad that
Of course.
enough people out there, but you also don't want to put it in people's faces because,
Exactly.
but it's a tough problem to have.
Yeah, exactly. But you can put them over by your, what is it, Bluegrass Hall of Fame New Last Revival plaque. Everywhere they look in your house, they're surrounded.
Yeah, I know. My
But
favorite thing I got though is the Flecktones got this award from the Montreal Jazz Festival, the Miles Davis Award, and it's like a guy playing the trumpet. It's Miles playing the trumpet and I like that one. I mean,
yeah,
that's a nice award because it just looked cool. It's just a nice piece of art, and you could just forget about it having anything to do with you.
But that speaks to how cool and how diverse and blended your music is, because you have plaques of Miles Davis, jazz legend. You're in, and then you're in Bluegrass Hall of Fame, and I mean you're a banjo legend. It's awesome. I love how you've diversified and woven stuff together.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
All right. Well, again, everybody, come see at Wolf Trap July 2nd. It's this Saturday. I guess, to speak to our listeners, tell them to come on out.
People, I'm giving you one last chance to come out and see this show. I promise you, you won't regret it. It's an awesome show.
See you Saturday down at Wolf Trap. It's a great spot. It'll be a great spot for music. Thanks so much for taking so much time for us.
Yeah, my pleasure. Good talking to you.
Talk to you soon.
Bye-bye.
Thanks so much for joining us on Beyond the Fame with Jason Fraley. Remember to hit the subscribe button and give us a 5-star rating if you like what you hear. We'll see you next time. I wanted to take a second to tell you about an app I really enjoy. Living in the DC area is great, and Podcast DC gathers all of the local shows that I like all in one local app. Health, sports, local news, politics, and so much more. Podcast DC is the new local app with hundreds of DC area podcasts to choose from. I can earn exciting rewards just for listening and share the podcasts I love instantly. Available in the App Store or in Google Play, listen local with Podcast DC.